Hello, everyone. My name is Darpan Seth, and I'm the CEO, co-founder here at Nextuple. We are an AI and first solutions company in the inventory and order management space. Lately, we've been hearing a lot of buzz about the B2B industry and about all the exciting things happening in that space. There's a big need for transformation and what have you. So today, I decided to have a chat with my very dear friend, Paul Forno. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks. Yeah, we go way back. I was trying to think. It's almost been 20 years, if not 20 years, right? Like back to the first, it was 2006, maybe.
2006, and some of us I think are too old, and we're still here. We're still talking about transformation, which makes me believe that we must be learning something new every day, and that's what makes our job so fascinating. And it's been a real pleasure knowing you all these years, Paul, and learning from you. And I hope that today's session will be along the same lines, where you can share some of your insights. Why don't you just give our viewers a little bit of your background? And obviously we can see you work at Deloitte, but it would be great to understand what you do.
Sure. So I know Darpan, you're a pretty humble guy, but you've done amazing stuff in the order management space. And I think what's interesting is when we first met, and you're joking about 20 years ago, that was a B2C, more of a retailer, and kind of the stage that they're at. In many ways, it's very analogous to where B2B is. And so that's where I think it's a really interesting kind of parallel there. But a little bit of background, I mean, Paul Forno, partner, I lead up our B2B commerce practice at Deloitte. And although I started in retail, e-commerce, and B2C and went through that pattern with some very big customers back in the day that we both had fun at, like Target and others. But I've spent the last 6 years really focused on the B2B space. And we think it's the biggest opportunity and biggest TAM. And Deloitte, that's really where our most growth is coming from. And in many ways, that's a little bit of laggards. And we're excited I've led some research on it here in the last year. And so look forward to talking about it today.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I mean, clearly it's a big enough, business that you have a dedicated practice at Deloitte, going after this, so, and I'm very, very excited to learn more about, the research that you guys have done in the space, right? Where we, see this from an Nextuple, point of view is that, we see that ordering channels have exploded over the years, right? So the number of ways, people and companies can buy these days has, increased. You could buy off of marketplaces, you could buy out of .com sites, you can, call somebody and place an order, right? So there's a lot of different options that, companies and individuals have these days, to buy stuff. And then on the other hand, there's a number of fulfillment options that are available, both old as well as some newer and emerging ones, and which sort of puts companies that are both B2B as well as B2C, and definitely so B2B where there's more complex arrangements involved, at the intersection of these options on multiple sides, right? So I imagine that a lot of the transformation work that you're seeing is sort of driven by what's really been happening around us in this ecosystem. So it would be great to hear from you as to what you see are the key growth opportunities in this B2B space, and what are some of these trends that you might be seeing that are more and more relevant today.
Yeah, one of the things that you talked about there, I think it's kind of an important thing. So one of the things I'd like to start with, and there's some good analogies, is on B2B. First of all, there's a lot of confusion about it. So when you say B2B commerce, not everybody understands it. And it's still a not well understood term, because especially in the B2B space, in many cultures, it's very more sales driven. And so what I've started to use, and very similar to the early conversations we had in B2C, I've started to use the term omni-channel B2B commerce. Okay. And I'm using that term not as a buzzword, but to force people to think omni-channel, well, that means there's many channels. And because what in B2B, they're a unique set of omni-channels, very different than B2C, right? So and I'll just kind of touch on it because this is kind of key to making sure everybody's on the same page here. So when you look at B2B commerce, it could be direct ordering on a web page, right? And that's a lot of times what people think about. It's that one channel off to the side, but there's a lot of other potentials. It could be, and a big growth area is, connecting into procurement commerce, punch out, order automation that connects up to uh, Coupa, Ariba, those kind of systems, and all the procurement systems. That's a massive channel for B2B. And of course, EDI is kind of associated with that. Being able to do dealer portals around, connecting into marketplaces, be it business-based marketplaces or your own marketplaces, to, enabling your call center to make orders on behalf, to CPQ. So there's a lot of opportunities there that actually we've now, and we also clarified that all of these tools are omni-channel commerce is the digitized tools to do sales. So that's what B2B commerce is. And that just helps to open the aperture that to say in these B2B companies, those are all the things that they're touching.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And, with that optionality in terms of, ordering channels and, different ways that, companies can, buy and sell to each other, I imagine that, inventory is a pretty big, part of being able to serve these customers well, right? In the sense that you have different types of customers ordering from different, channels. You may have different contractual agreements with each of these buyers, depending on their scale and size and, what products they want and, how they want to configure different parts of your inventory into, full units, etc. So I imagine there's a lot of complexity, on that inventory side, and not just in terms of how much do, these companies have available, but how do you make the accurate, and good and right promise in terms of, I have it, I can get it to you. How quickly can I get it to you? So, could you talk a little bit more about, how you see that as a factor, and, how is that today served out to these different channels?
Yeah, and not to add more complexity to it, because it keeps getting more and more complex, because then as soon as you put global, right, and different business units and departments, it just keeps growing and growing. And so this becomes kind of the long-term challenge of how do you, and that's where I'd like to go back and kind of, where we looked at the research and a lot of the voice of the customer research that's come back to us that we've talked to our clients. The interesting part in many ways, in commerce, actually ordering, like just the actual buying, isn't the number one thing.
Right.
Interestingly, like order status, order availability, some of those actually are more important from a portal perspective that they're looking at. So, going back to, the importance of like what you were talking about in the inventory, like that's actually as important as the actual hitting the button to order.
Right.
So from an experience perspective, that's what customers are saying is like more important on some of the things, because, obviously they can plan depending on when source materials are arriving, and it gets to be a lot of coordination. So that's something. So just from an experience perspective, notwithstanding a lot more. So I'll just pause there if you wanted to maybe add on, because I do have other thoughts beyond what needs to happen, right?
Yeah, no, you're spot on. What you're saying is it's not just the fact that do I have it, can I place an order, but buyers are interested in better visibility, getting alerted to, hey, there may be an exception, my order might be delayed, so that they can plan in turn, how that gets deployed, in their environment, et cetera, right? So customer experience is, become, really, really, really important, right? And so all of this sort of falls in what you might call the front office, right? In terms of,
Mhm.
you have digital selling tools, you have portals, you have, EDI feeding, applications like Coupa, like you said, right? And um, the ability to have information near real time, right? Which sort of leads us to think about, this whole interaction between, buying channels and, fulfillment, to be, a lot more responsive, right? And, some of the things that we've seen over the years, Paul, is that the legacy technology that sort of exists in place today is really not built for that, near real time responsive, information flowing back and forth, right? So I can't imagine that all of this is, even though the demands are there and people, expect, seamless flow of information, that, current systems are really holding up to that challenge. And so, I would think that that's driving a lot of change in these organizations. Would be great to hear your point of view as to what that change is, and, if you see that being real.
Yeah, so I think you said a couple key things. So number one, just to build on that, yeah, you mentioned front office. So commerce is kind of at the center of the front office.
Hmm.
And so that whole enabling your customer to have the visibility in all the different ways across that front office buying life cycle is so key. So, and that's a lot of what we're focusing on. And in fact, that, there's massive growth in like just to, instead of what the classic would be, call your sales guy and what's the status of my order, right? And so many of the times, many of the salespeople were just update takers or
Right.
update givers, right? And so
Right.
transforming that front office to enabling that. So I think one of the questions you asked too is like, what else is happening behind the scenes? Well, if you include like companies doing acquisitions where they have multiple ERPs. So of
Right.
course, to get access to some of that information, you're going back and, connected to ERPs, and then it's not always as easy, right? Because there's not, even though there may be some standard SAP or Oracle integrations, many times a lot of customizations happen, and it takes a little bit to do. But then when you get into some companies who might have acquisitions or different units, might have multiple instances of ERP, that becomes more, much more harder to integrate all that data. And that's where, in the B2B space, that's probably the prime opportunity where order management helps, especially across all the multitudes of ERP systems that a company might have.
Yeah, no, no, that makes a lot of sense. So I think, we spoke a little bit about inventory, and, what do the next piece there is, you have inventory, but how do you orchestrate the moves, right? How do you orchestrate that, especially if that information sits across multiple ERPs, different versions, different companies, how do you create that unified view of, not just the inventory, but then how do you orchestrate orders that might flow through to these, multiple, business units? So, order management and inventory management, at least, from the Nextuple point of view, we see that as sort of being the glue between the front office and the back office, if we may call the ERPs the back office. Um, and what we're also finding is that in many instances, companies are, looking to adopt cloud technologies, or even, predictive AI, modeling, to make a better promise, to make a better orchestration decision, and then be able to, fill the gaps with not just, upgrading the ERP systems, which are obviously a lot better in this day and age, but also complementing that with, technology that can, help for that seamless flow of, transfer of information, and, make these systems more responsive, if you may, to, changes that are happening both on the supply side as well as on the demand side.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think part of what, if you look from the B2B experience, and it's different than from a B2C. In many ways, it's B2C, you have one person. You get to convince them, they hit the button and they buy, and then great. But when you're dealing with all the different personas, again, if you go back in our research and looking at making sure you understand the procurement person, the field sales, the field person that's out there who may be servicing, you need to think about all of those. What's the interesting or important data for them, right? Like if I have to have the parts to go out in the field and fix something and I don't know when they're coming and you're dependent on it, it's critical. So that's the other part that makes it a little bit more complicated in the B2B space, is that there's way more use cases other than just getting the order to the door. It's also the timing, the scheduling that might get into, service contracts, etc.
You bet. I think what you're saying is that there's so many people involved in both placing an order as well as uh, you know consuming it, because there's usually a service element associated with buying a B2B product as well. And so if you want to coordinate a product and a service together, and maybe perhaps multiple products that come together to then solve a specific customer need, you almost have to take a persona based view of who your users are, what their needs are, what data they need, and then be able to surface it up to them as seamlessly as possible, right? And so and I assume that those are some of the other elements in that front office to really map out who these individuals are who are a part of that buying process as well as consumption cycle, and then be able to get them the right tooling and the right information at the right time.
Yeah, because and what's interesting, another key trend, and it's important on this front office, like why the front office is important. One of the massive trends that are happening is that there's a huge ERP upgrade sets. Like right now, SAP to S4, there's probably 16,000 to 20,000 upgrades that need to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. So
That's
that's
massive.
just crazy massive that all these upgrades are happening. Well, the thing that we're finding out, and this is something that we're helping clients with, and a lot of the ones in the enterprise side are using, some combination of Salesforce and SAP in the front office, and other combinations, also mock-based solutions. All of those, they're driving. We've now found that we can help the business case to do the upgrade. So a lot of times the upgrades that they have to, it's our sunk cost. They know they need to do it. But we've now, a couple of clients have come to us and say, hey, we're having a hard time finding any additional business value. And, especially commerce has shown net new revenue that's helped the business case. So what's interesting out there for, some of the execs, you can actually get a better bang for your buck if you also include front office capabilities, and which could be some portals, but more importantly, commerce.
Right.
So I've got a couple of case studies. One case study off the top of my head, we showed where the front office investments were 24% of the overall business case for the investment, but actually generated 57% of the business case. So translated is the front office helped to pay for the back office.
Right. Yeah, it's, what you're really saying is that the front office is sort of the key to unlocking more value, from an investment that you needed to make in the first place, right? So, you're in that ERP upgrade cycle. You have to make that investment just to keep the lights on and, stay running. But it's big dollars to put towards, an upgrade. So therefore, if you can find additional value unlock of, upgrading that ERP, but then also, tapping, into creating a better customer experience, or, getting into more ordering channels, right? And so that sort of, pays for a big part of what that upgrade cycle might, cost otherwise.
Yeah, and in the past it was like, come back later, like we're working on the back office, but now you can do them at the same time.
Right.
right? And so it's an opportunity. I think instead of, executives out there, think of it broadly. If you're gonna, it's like in some ways, I use the analogy is like if you're gonna go renovate half your house, why don't you renovate the whole thing?
Yeah, you bet.
Right? Especially in B2B, they don't happen very often. And so this is where it's a huge opportunity for front office, and I think that whole inventory order management piece, which is in the middle there as well, it's all part of that, and that helps drive the value for those ERP upgrades that you have to do.
Right. Right. No, you're exactly right. And so, the analogy I use is that, order management and inventory management sort of sits in the center of this front office, back office communication channel. And, it's got that check engine light on if you don't do something about it. And so, it's almost like, going from a gasoline-based, engine to, perhaps a hybrid or, you know, having an electric, motor in between that can actually, be far more efficient and responsive, to allow for seamless transactions between that front office and, back office. So we are seeing some, pretty interesting, use cases where, customers want to have a better, promising mechanism, right? When placing orders. So, at times taking on a B2B order means that you have to go all the way to manufacturing and understand what your, lead times are like, to produce an item, and then, put it on a ship to then transfer it across the globe and then get it to your, facility. So, these orders are sometimes placed months in advance, right? And so to be able to look out that far and also see what else is going on in your supply chain, and then be able to make a more accurate predictive promise versus saying, I think I'm going to get it to you in 8 or 10 weeks, and then say, oops, it's going to be another 4 weeks thereafter, right? So what we are finding is that, there are some really good use cases based on historical performance where, perhaps you can, leverage AI and predictive models to be able to paint that better customer experience or better promise. But again, it sort of sits in that sandwich, cheese layer between that front office and, back office. Since, we can't have a conversation without talking of AI, are you seeing, applications for AI in the space? And if so, what are some of the areas that or use cases that you can, think of?
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny. I think we're at peak hype cycle on Gen AI right now, and you know, honestly, I think since I went through the whole internet bubble, I feel like we're in you know 2000 where um all of the pets.com blew up, right? Like where maybe it's everybody's not gonna everything's gonna be one easy button. So I think the short term is overhyped and the long term is under not understood totally and will be bigger impact than we think. So I think right now, I think there's going to be very certain cases. And so a lot of what's happened in the B2B space and many of the companies are in the B2B commerce related area. I think they're still they're doing the fundamentals. Because if you don't have your fundamentals and automation and data in place, there's no magic Gen AI fixing all that.
You
So
bet.
that's really I'd rather stay in kind of what the real world is. But I think what you'll find is you're going to find, like you brought up a case around helping around visibility and proving and scheduling and on the inventory. That makes sense. I think there's the cases that are shared with B2C that are very clear cases are around product information, product diagrams, all that kind of material are clear cases. I think there's going to be more use cases where it'll fill out, especially by industry, very specific um, uh, areas where it'll drive through. But like, I think the B2B space they're so early on the life cycle of the maturity curve. They got to get over the halfway up before they really take advantage of a lot of the promise of Gen AI.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. And going back to your earlier analogy, right? When you said that, hey, if you're going to renovate a part of your house, you might as well renovate the whole thing. When you renovate, you actually take things down to the frame,
Yeah.
right? Before you put in new electrical, or new plumbing, or new drywall, new paint, what have you, right? And so to your point, you've got to go back to that foundational build out before you can start to get um, the finish going. And I think hopefully by the time the fundamentals are fixed or the plumbing is in place, that they'll also the use cases that AI can be leveraged will also become a lot clearer, right? And get to more specific value cases and be able to be applied in a lot more meaningful way. So I do agree with you that I think this is sort of that early stage where we have a pretty powerful new technology available to us. The question is, can we take a more rational and reasoned approach to finding the right use cases and applying them to it, and then also testing that, hey, does this really work? Because especially with Gen AI, there's so much hallucination possible that you almost need to have a very strong check and balance in place before you can really just apply Gen AI and hand it over to people that may use it.
Yeah, I think the easier cases too are probably more in the service side.
Yeah.
And customer service. That's a prime solution around commerce. I think it will come.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. So hey, I run into this problem. How should I fix it? What should how should I research it? Or like you said, I'm looking for this, spare part, and what are my options, right? Where can I get it? Right. So I mean, there's a lot of history, on that, service, side that you
Yeah.
can mine. I think
Yeah.
querying that history and providing informed answers, I think that's a really good use case of
Yeah.
for Gen AI. Well, that's pretty much all I had today, to discuss with you, Paul. It's been entertaining and all a pleasure talking to you, learning from you. I hope we can continue the conversation and come back and learn more insights based on your actual field experience of running these transformation programs.
Yeah, no, let's keep the conversation going. I think there's so much opportunity on the B2B space and really getting, empowering IT executives to leverage digitizing all things sales, move away from the manual. And I think all of this is, if we come down to the bottom, what we're trying to solve for on the front office is how do you make it easy to do business with? So commerce is really about ease of doing business, because if you're easy to do business with, people are going to buy more from you. It's really that simple.
You bet. And I think, in that regard, I guess, we are, a fast follower in the sense that, if you're easy to transact with, how do you, keep the promises that you've just made?
Right.
Right. And so, on the supply chain side or on the order management, inventory management side, our job is, okay, whatever promises are being made or whatever, customer experience standards are being set, that they're actually being delivered to, and that we are learning and, creating more of that responsive, fulfillment network that can, complete that full experience for the end customer. So super exciting to talk to you, Paul. Thank you for all the insights and for sharing all the valuable research that Deloitte has done, from all of us here at Nextuple. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Darpan.